Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 193 of Rush Roundtable. This is our super hot takes, or the hottest of the hot takes, whatever you want to call it. This is going to function a little bit like our great take or let's debate episodes that we've done in the past, but this one is each person has come to the table or to the panel with what they believe is a super hot take of their own, and then more or less the panel is going to either say, all right, I think that is a hot take, but I agree, or hopefully they're going to debate it because the point of a super hot take is that it's a very controversial opinion, right? So before we get into it, we have two brand new panelists this time around. So middle left we have Tyler. So welcome, thanks for hopping on. And middle right, we have Shane, and Shane's got his own Rush podcast called Every Rush Song. So I'll let you take it away. Tell us where you can watch your show or your podcast.
Oh, yeah. Just search Every Rush Song on whatever podcast platform you like. And then on YouTube, we are at Every Rush Song.
Easy enough. Cool.
Tried to make it easy. I tried.
We're glad to have both of you, and this should be definitely probably an interesting first episode for the both of you. So,
yeah.
How this is going to work is we're going to let Tal go first. He's going to share his hot take, and then he's going to call on the rest of the panel and see what they think about his hot take. So, from that sweet basement he's got there, go ahead, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you don't hate me in a few seconds. So my super hot take is that Alex Lifeson is not that great of a guitarist. Allow me to explain. So
you better explain that.
I don't play guitar, first of all. I play bass, drums, and I sing. Guitar is the one thing I don't play, so I'm not as much as an expert with how to play guitar that well. But I want to say a few things. First off, he is a masterful composer. I will give him that. I love the chords he's invented, his very, very unique style of playing with his solos and arpeggios, things like that. His riffs, they're very, very memorable. And just listening to his stuff on the studio is just always a treat. However, for me, that changes when I hear him live, especially since the renaissance of Rush, I would say since Vapor Trails tour. He's just not that precise. And you might link his arthritis to be part of that problem, but it didn't really seem to get that serious until maybe the last couple of tours, particularly R40. But a perfectionist like myself likes to listen to every little detail in the song compared to the studio. And a lot of times, Alex, maybe he'll change something on purpose, that's fine. But he's just a little bit of a sloppy flubber, I've kind of noticed. His chord changes were not very fast. Sometimes in a solo, you hear him hit the wrong notes. And I think people call him the most underrated rock guitarist of all time. And I think all this praise in the Rush and prog community overall is actually making him slightly overrated. I love the guy. I really do. But I always thought of him, even in the 80s and 90s, as just a slightly less precise, right on player as Geddy and Neil, especially in the 2010s. It was actually kind of common he'd make a little mistake per song. And while it's okay, it shows he's human. When people call Rush one of the most musically proficient bands, on the planet, people tend to forget that about Alex. And, his bandmates didn't really seem to have as much of that problem. Just a little bit of a sloppy player live. Ryan, what do you think of my take?
I think you're crazy. I mean, precise and accuracy wise, I don't. I mean, I own a couple guitars and occasionally play, but that I'm not precise at all when I play, right? So I don't know how to speak to that aspect of it. And to your point about him maybe being overrated now, I guess if you say something's underrated so much, it gets to the point where now it might be over. I guess I could kind of see that slightly, but because like we as Rush fans like put him on such a high pedestal because other people put him so low, right? So it's like, I guess I could kind of see that point, but yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think he's a fantastic guitar player. I think he's fantastic for Rush in every way. So
Yeah, for me, it's more so about like from a technical standpoint. You know, as a musician, I don't think it's phenomenal. I just want to clear that up. Igor, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's actually a great take because I heard the I track of some 80s live show. I don't remember what it is, but it's complete show DI signal, so without any effects or anything. And it's really kind of sloppy sometimes, and it's okay. And as you said, the chord changes. They're sometimes not that fast, exactly. And the second thing is that lots of this magic of Rush sound comes from the studio, especially in the 80s, because of the layering of different, tracks, and besides 70s, because in the 70s there was nothing kind of interesting technique-wise. That's why, in the 70s he was just kind of like, not average, but nothing really special, because, well, the riffs were just kind of 70s based, with occasional like prog influence. And what about the solos? Yeah, they are sloppy sometimes because I said it on the Neurotica and You Bet Your Life episode that you can't cover Alex Lifeson's solos note by note. No, you can't cover like John Petrucci, like those like players who play by patterns, But his solos are just like so, I'm pretty sure they just cut lots of takes, glued them together. There we go. You can't replicate that. So yeah, he's not underrated, he's not overrated, but we can like take it with a grain of salt, all of his like guitar skills sometimes, with all due respect. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Igor. I appreciate it. Tyler?
I think there's like several decades worth you got to look at the work. I mean, the 70s guitar solos are they're very 70s, right? And then in the 80s, I think that's when you start getting into the voice and the technique of his playing. As far as him being sloppy, you got to think for as much as Rush played over 50 years, there's probably some off nights in there, no doubt. I'm gonna disagree though. I think he's a feel player, and I think that's just right. Straight up. He plays straight from feel. So
good point.
I do agree with that. Thanks, Tyler. Jesse, any thoughts?
So I would say I would mostly agree, actually. Maybe if the wording was like a little more specific, like I mean specifically more about his technical ability and maybe not being underrated, because I feel like everybody that would know him well enough to rate him would rate him highly. Like I don't hear people bashing Alex Lifeson for being like a bad guitarist that somehow got famous. So I feel like underappreciated or underknown maybe would be good. Although these days it's Rush is a lot more of a household name than it was even 10 years ago. So it's might not be able to say that for a while. Technically as well, with the age, you see it slow down a little bit on R40, and there's some bum notes on solos here and there. So it's more comparing that to his absolute peak, the soundboards you can get late 70s, early 80s, which were really cutting edge at the time. So yeah, I'd say I would mostly agree with that.
Thank you, man. Shane?
You're welcome.
No, that's an understandable take. And I say that because one of the reasons he's my favorite guitarist, it's the same as with, I don't know if you're familiar with Big Head Todd and the Monsters, their guitarist, Todd Parkmore, very much like Alex on the debut album, which I love, but I love his sloppiness. I just love that sloppy blues sound that he has on that first album. And also think it adds for a band that's really precise. He adds a very human aspect to it. It makes it a little more emotional. And that's with the leads. And then on top of his chords that he comes up with, and then the textures and the sounds. And we've talked about how on Red Barchetta and Xanadu, how he uses his guitar to paint a picture of a morning. And that's very prog versus someone, I guess, like, I don't know, like Yngwie Malmsteen, maybe, who's going to be very precise. So yeah, it's going to be a matter of opinion or what you like. So I completely understand that as your take, Tal, but that's why I would debate it.
I get that. Thanks for sharing your opinion. And finally, Evan.
Well, I definitely disagree, but I do see where you're coming from. But also, like you said he's not like, we didn't say he's a bad guitarist, but I mean, with his work with Rush, I mean, all of it's fantastic. But while you were saying your take, all I was thinking about was Victor and how me personally, I'm not really the biggest fan of that record, at least guitar wise. I don't know. It just doesn't scratch that itch that I look for when it comes to Alex's guitar work. So I understand where you're coming from, but he's my personal favorite guitarist of all time. So I think I disagree as a whole.
Thanks everyone for sharing your opinions. So I guess you don't hate me. Correct.
Yeah, for the record, he's my favorite too.
Probably even my favorite too, but just had to say.
All right, so my turn to give my take. So my take is that I might make up some words in this take here. Is that Hold Your Fire, 1987's Hold Your Fire, is the most conceptual / concept-y album in the entire discography. So, explanation. What is a concept album? You have to start there, right? A concept album is a rock album that has concepts and themes running throughout all the songs, right? I'm sick and freaking tired of seeing all these articles saying how 2112 is this great concept album. 2112 is not a concept album. 2112 has a song that tells a story and has some of that slightly intertwined in some of the songs on the album. Think Something for Nothing, right? I'm tired of hearing Clockwork Angels as a concept album. Clockwork Angels tells an entire story. Go read the book, okay? Hold Your Fire to me is the most conceptual Rush album that there is. And now you may ask, oh, well, I don't even know what the concept is. I don't even know what the theme is. The entire theme, and it's not surface level. It's not like Power Windows. Okay, the theme is power, right? It's not that obvious. The theme that runs through Hold Your Fire is instinct. And a lot of it is human instinct. If you go through and I'll give you a couple examples. Time Stands Still, you have the human instinct of time. High Water, you have human and their instinctiveness with water. Tai Shan literally tells a story of Neil's instinct on, at the top of the Mount Tai Shan. And some other songs that come to mind that are easy to explain for the sake of this, Open Secrets, Instincts with Love and all that. Lock and Key, your primal instinct. I think that, and this really set the tone for what was to come after that too, with Presto, Roll the Bones, Counterparts. We've done a lot of talking about that in our recent song discussions for Rush Roundtable. But yeah, that's my take, is that Hold Your Fire is the most conceptual Rush album in the entire discography. So I know, Tal, you love Hold Your Fire, so great take. All right, Egor.
I'm not a native English speaker, so sometimes I don't understand lyrics as you do, so I gotta actually read them and read some Rush Vault website about the meanings of the tracks. And while you were talking, I was thinking about it. Yeah, I agree, because you mentioned Power Windows. Power Windows to me is like the most conceptual album in terms of music and production. Like, it's so unique from start to end. But Hold Your Fire, you're right, because I fell in love with Hold Your Fire only last summer, and I've been Rush fan for 15 years. So the memory of Hold Your Fire and the lyrics are fresh. So I agree with you. Yeah, that's great point. Yeah, great take.
Okay. Maybe my explanation didn't do it any favors, but for getting other things in great takes. Tyler?
Oh man, I think, really, I mean, barring like to me, all Rush albums are concept albums. I mean, because you have to look at
You
them
could make
as
that argument.
they
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
they are a fully formed piece, which it's interesting that there is no unreleased material. That the album is the album, and I think they formed albums as like here's this whole piece. Now, Hold Your Fire, as I would agree with that. I quite a bit. I mean, like I said, I think that you got to view it through the lens of all their albums are concept albums, but I think that one seems to. I can agree with that. You could go deep on the lyrics and really tie the themes together, and I think you can kind of do that with some of.
Well, that's
albums,
my point. Is lyrically most, like
yeah,
because I think Hold Your Fire is one of Neil's best in terms of tying lyrics to a theme and a concept, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would agree with that.
Okay,
sure.
Cool. Jesse?
I'm a little bit split on it. I guess it really depends on like what you consider a concept album to be, whether it's just reserved to lyrics or the sound as well. Like I don't really hear it as a concept album sound wise, but lyrics definitely. And yeah, I'd like to know what they said about that as well. Maybe in some more detail, just to see if Neil thought of it like that while writing. Because I haven't heard it mentioned up till now. Haven't really thought about it, but it's definitely interesting to point that out.
Jane?
When you first said it, I was ready to debate you with Power Windows, maybe counterparts. But after your explanation, I think it's a great take. And particularly the part about Clockwork Angels. When I first listening to it, to me, Clockwork Angels seemed like a concept album. But then after reading the book, it's not as conceptual as it might seem.
As much as it is a story. A little bit different.
Excellent point. Yeah. Great take.
Cool. Evan?
I was just about to go like full on and be like, no, Clockwork Angels is a concept album. Like I think it's the most conceptual one. I didn't realize it didn't. I've never read the book. I didn't realize it didn't quite thought like it just told a story. I guess now with that new perspective, I guess I got to say great take, because Hold Your Fire is, like you said, all lyrically, all the themes they center around instinct, and I honestly, I don't really have much else to add. I'll just say great take. We can move on.
So do I win the night? I get everyone to say great take?
I think so. Good job, dude.
But yes.
Well, all right. I guess I completely missed the objective. Agor, your turn.
Here we go. There are debates about Presto sounding too thin, right? Or like Weber Trails sounding too loud. So here's my hot take. Clockwork Angels could have better production, and the overall flow of the album is ruined because of that. What I mean by it could have better production. I remember when Caravan and BU2B were released in 2010 in June. It sounded awesome, like wow. But then Clockwork Angels, the album, came out almost 2 years later, exactly, almost 2 years. And as we know, Caravan and BU2B were the first 2 tracks on the album. So I'm listening to the album in full, as intended, and on the 3rd track, Clockwork Angels, there's a huge difference in mixing. It goes downhill like so bad. And I know they were recorded earlier in the different studios, but like after the first 2 tracks, everything is muffled. Drums have no punch. The guitars have no high frequencies at all. The whole thing has no air. And it's all covered in the constant like weird boominess of low frequencies and bass. And the first 2 tracks, they sound completely different. They sound much brighter, more clear, and have more details. And on the rest of the album, a lot of this ear candy, lots of like layers and details, they just got lost in the mix. They get buried. That's it. Tal, your thoughts?
I think that is a great take. A big reason why the last three Rush albums aren't so frequently in my listening sessions is because of how they begin to turn their mixes into a loudness war, particularly and probably worst so with Vapor Trails, but didn't seem to me like they fully recovered from it, which kind of makes me annoyed because they were able to, like, they want to obviously convert back to a heavy guitar-driven power trio sound, right? I think they did that so well with Counterparts, recorded in Le Studio, which is probably my favorite studio that they ever recorded in. And Clarity was so on point. Neil was playing his Ludwigs for the last time, and Getty's first time recording with the jazz bass on a full album, the Fender Jazz, and everything just sounded so spot on, and you didn't really miss anything. Even the little synths in there, you could hear it. But then, with those Renaissance albums, definitely Clarity has been sacrificed, and that kind of bugs me. The first two,
what bugs me the most, what is the take, is that the first two tracks sound amazing. There is a clarity, there is everything, and then it just.
I think they recorded those two songs in Nashville. Could be, or maybe the whole album was in Nashville. I can't.
No, the rest of it was in Canada, I think.
Right, and then they sounded pretty good on Time Machine tour as well. But that's a great take, man. Great take.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I never really thought of it like that. And I think it's a decent take. I look at songs like The Anarchist, The Wreckers, and maybe The Garden as outliers to that point. Seven Cities of Gold is, I mean, I like the song, but it's super heavy, super muffled. Wish Them Well's kind of not great. I think Halo Effect could have been done a little bit differently. What am I missing? Carnies, that's really ballsy and heavy and not. So yeah, I mean, long story short, I think that's a fair take.
Okay, Tyler.
I never really thought about those the two tracks that they came out with as being different than, but I think what a lot of bands anymore seem to get into, and I know this just from my own stuff when I'm recording at home, I get so deep into it sometimes, and I mess with the stuff so much that you lose something in the translation instead of just letting it, just here's the piece, let the piece be the piece, and let's not add too much to it. Let's not try to compress this or add effects to this and make it a little more natural. But I've never really considered that those two songs were different than the rest, because that's an album that's like I have a hard time with that album just because it's like the last one, so it kind of hurts my feelings a little bit sometimes. So I've never really dug into it that deep. But bands have a tendency sometimes to get so into the production and all the theatrics of it, like putting the album together, lose that natural thing that they would normally have. Like something like Permanent Waves has a lot, it's very natural sounding. I mean, like natural science, obviously, but it's like the whole album, it's not overdone. And I think that's what happens. I think bands have a tendency to overdo the production and the effects and the compression and all the studio tricks and stuff, rather than just let the music do the talking and just not over. So I now I'm going to go listen to those two and compare it to the rest of the album. Now I'm going to be going crazy for the rest of the night.
The arrangements and the overall mixing are kind of the same, but the mastering aspect of it, it's different. So I'm going to go tentatively agree with that though, and because I think that's like Snakes and Arrows kind of suffers from that too, where it's just like it's so. It's just there's so much going on, It's impossible to get the whole thing. Okay, Jesse.
I think it's a great take. And I just want to clarify, when you said that the first two tracks were different than the rest of the album, did you mean if you're listening to the album or if you're listening to the actual original singles released before?
They copy pasted them on the album.
Because you can find versions on YouTube, and it's if you read the comments, a lot of people seem to think they were mastered differently for the singles, and then once they did the album, they changed it. Either way, I think it's oversaturated Like what works good in a song like The Garden isn't going to translate to something like Headlong Flight, especially during the busy section, big drum fills and stuff.
That's a
If you
song
have
I
that much
forgot.
ambience, it's just everything gets swallowed up and all that ambience and echo. It sounds great by itself, but you just have to be careful with it when it comes to their progressive roots. So yeah, great take.
Okay. Uh, I'm sorry, Shane, right?
Shane. Yeah, my
Okay.
friends call me Shanye. Just kidding. I like Tyler. I'm gonna have to listen to it again because I don't know that I've noticed the difference between the tracks, but I did notice how it's not as crisp as some of the other albums, and I thought they were maybe trying to compensate for some limitations due to age. Maybe Getty can't hit the notes that he used to be able to, so they kind of hid some things in the mix. But now, I mean, I'm going to say good take, and thanks for giving me something to listen for later today.
Okay. Evan.
I'm kind of torn on this one. Honestly, I can't really tell if I agree or disagree with it. It's definitely a fair take. I'm not super opinionated when it comes to 2000s Rush. It's not super heavy in my Rush rotation. But I mean, I do agree that Clockwork Angels, it lacks a little bit of that like oomph that some Rush albums have. I think I also am gonna have to go back and listen to it again so I can like fully form an opinion. But for now, I'll say fair take.
Okay. Really quick. My point was also about the fact that the first two tracks, they sound completely different from the rest. So when I listen to the Clockwork Angels, I skip the first two tracks because then it's just disappointment. That's it.
All right, Tyler, your turn.
All right. So here's my super hot take here. Rush should have not done any albums after Grace Under Pressure. They should have taken a more Canadian, dignified Chinese democracy approach to their recording. All the songs they recorded, they all still exist. They just didn't put out an album until they recorded one in 96, and they had 60 something odd tracks to choose from. And they would have put out an album instead of Test for Echo. They would have put out an 8-track album comprised of the tracks that they'd recorded over the previous 10 or so years, produced by Terry Brown. It would have come close to surpassing Moving Pictures, I feel like. And with the caveat that all those extra tracks left over, they could have put out a 50-something song box set of all these unreleased tracks and really excited people. But I think that absence would have really fired people up. They still tour, they still play the hits, they still do all that stuff. But in the meantime, they're kind of quietly working on something. They just keep telling people, it's coming, it's coming. And then 10 years later, boom, here's this album. And yeah, and I think at that time, I think Terry Brown had spent time with Voivod and Faith Warning. So I think it would have been a good time for them to put that team back together. And real quick, my 8-track album that I came up with, I didn't have a title for it, but it has Show Don't Tell, Cut to the Chase, Stick It Out, Turn the Page, Dreamline, Driven, The Big Money, and Available Light. And that was the album. And then, of course, I have a 50-something song box set that came out at some undisclosed time in the Al.
All right, so at first I wanted to go crazy when he said they should not release any albums after Grace Under Pressure, because this stretch of Power Windows to Roll the Bones is my favorite era of the band. So I was good. But then you mentioned the whole box set thing with combining songs from all those records into one album. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they would have still recorded as if they would have a box set of all these extra unreleased songs, but they would have released eventually in '96 an 8-track album. But they'd been recording all along. They've been recording stuff, and then the box set would be all the extra stuff that was all the things that didn't make it to the album.
It's kind of hard to wrap my head around. Like, I guess if you're not omitting the existence of all those albums and the songs on those albums, then I guess it's not a bad take. But I guess we'd never know how successful it actually would have been, unless they did it themselves. So I'd say interesting take on that one.
Fair. Take that. All right, Ryan.
So Neil had said in an interview somewhere that he would have been fine if Rush started at moving pictures, which pretty much tells me that he was very satisfied with everything post moving pictures. I disagree with the take. I think I don't see it. I will say though, as my final point here, they definitely could have benefited from maybe 3 or 4 years off in between. They were probably burnt out. Now, Power Windows and Hold Your Fire and they're all really good albums, but I do think they could have benefited from a little bit of time off after Grace Under Pressure for sure. After Terry Brown left, and let's just sit down, give it 3 years, regroup. But
yeah,
you can do a lot in a lifetime if you don't burn out too fast.
I couldn't. I don't. I couldn't see it.
Okay. All right, Igor.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say let's debate because, well, you see, they recorded the albums, and how do I say it? It's really hard to record an album where every track sounds different. So to me, it's like impossible to happen. It would take so much effort to do this, and here, like what did you say, Cut to the Chase, and some other like tracks from The Big Money, I think. They just could not be on the same like album, It's like impossible, especially considering the density of the tracks. Like,
yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to exist in a world where like Power Windows, Hold Your Fire, and Presto don't exist. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love those albums. But I get your point. Yeah, I totally get that. Mine was like a what if, like a Marvel Comics what if.
Yeah.
Jesse.
Yeah, so I mean to add what everybody else has said, like it's a cool thought experiment. Like if you could somehow get a peek at what that would be like, without having to sacrifice the other albums, like that's would be my problem, accepting it, is that having less Rush is never going to be able to fly with me. So, but it's a cool idea though.
Yeah. Groovy. Awesome. Shane.
I just really like all those albums, and I wouldn't want them to see them all bunched together or redistributed in any other way. There might have been a better way, but I like it the way it is now.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Interesting take though.
Evan.
It is hot take.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting take, but I'm happy with the way that everything went down as we know it. I wouldn't want anything changed or anything like that. So I think for the most part, I disagree.
Fair enough.
I bet in the
Definitely
YouTube comments, so you could find some people that would agree.
Definitely
Probably,
some good points brought up though. In the rebuttals. All right, Jesse, what do you got?
All right, so my hot take is that, well, first of all, if you go to look at any comment section on like a modern Neil solo video, or any of the kind of HD era performances and stuff like that, a lot of people will say that Neil just kept getting better and better all the way to the end, and he was at his absolute peak at R40 and stuff like that. But in my opinion, I think his peak was Roll the Bones era, specifically that tour. It's by far my favorite, from sound and setup he had. But not just that, I just, watching bootleg videos, it just looks like his technical ability was really in its prime. The level of velocity he had on every hit in the entire set, it's like he still wasn't breaking a sweat by the end of any show I've seen. And I've seen pretty much every show from that era. And Around Counterparts is probably about when I start to notice little mistakes here and there. If I'm really paying attention, I'm a drummer, so it's like it's nothing that it's impossible not to make little mistakes every show. But I think Roll the Bones is kind of the perfect balance between, that where I really don't notice. It's really hard to notice him slipping up ever, and it's just like an incredible performance. every night. So yeah, overall my take is that he peaked around that time, I'd say. What do you think, Brian?
I
Tal,
completely
Tal
agree.
first. Yeah.
I
Oh,
completely
Tal,
agree with
sorry.
that, Jesse. As a fellow drummer, I think you made some amazing points. I don't really think he had any like any severe downfalls with age, which I really appreciate. He worked super hard till the end, but that period, and then I would even stretch it a little beyond Roll the Bones, like maybe like Hold Your Fire to Roll the Bones, like those three tours, he was just so on with time, perfectly on time with samples without needing click tracks, and just his power was unmatched. That was before his lessons with Freddie Gruber too, and he was just so full of energy, still relatively young, and yeah, that's a great take, man.
Thank you, Tal. Sorry, I wasn't even paying attention to the order, so I was just looking at the squares on my
No, you're
screen.
good.
Were you next?
Yeah,
You
I
you
can
can
help you
just
out if need
save
be,
this.
but I know nothing about hitting round things with wooden things, so I I mean, I guess I defer to what Tal says. I mean, he's, one of our resident drummers, but I do like his work at Test for Echo. I mean, like I'm drawn to Test for Echo a little bit because of Neil's drumming. So, and maybe that's the Freddie Gruber change, but I I have no opinion on that take really, other than what I just said. So
That's
I'm
fair.
sorry.
I mean,
I'll
no,
pass
it's
to
all
Igor.
good. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say it's a great take because the latest tours and videos, they kind of lack some energy from all the band members in some way. And so, yeah, great take. I really don't know what to add there because, and yeah, what actually pisses me off is that people really like to like write on the YouTube comments of some like old bands with the new stuff like, oh, they are still kicking ass. Well, no, listen to like this, like as you said, like Roll the Bones. It's completely different, like another level. Great take.
Thanks. It doesn't mean he's not doing his best still and better
Yeah,
than
yeah, yeah. Just
anybody else at that age. It's just
yeah.
the truth. Was it who's next? Tyler?
Tyler, yep, Tyler.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think at that point, early '90s, Roll the Bone there. I think all the elements of his playing were there in full force. The artistry, the technique, the power, it was all right there. So I would agree with that. Yes.
I think just the one thing I want to add is I think the one problem I have is the Presto Roll the Bones tinny sound. Everyone said Martin Popoff, for example, we'll throw Martin Popoff's name in the hat here, has said, I think on our channel too, like how tinny those albums sound, and I don't disagree with that, but I don't think that makes them bad, like kind of what he says. But I do think that maybe I'd appreciate your perspective more, Jesse, if those records sounded a little bit better. If that makes sense.
Fair enough. That is the issue because it's probably my least favorite studio sound, but my favorite live sound. So it is a bit of a
Okay,
conflict
so
there.
I'll have
So
to go back because there's
I
no
do agree
DVD
with
for
you
Roll
on
the
that.
Bones, right? So like I have to go watch some of the
Unfortunately, no.
bootlegs. Yeah,
There's
so
soundboards, really
Just
good soundboards.
trying.
I'll send one
yeah,
to you later.
that's homework for me then.
Cool. Shane?
Yep.
I'm going to defer to the two drummers and say great take, but I am going to ask my co-host Tim, who's also a drummer, and I'm going to ask him to get back to us in the comments about what he thinks about
Good call. Good call.
Cool.
Look forward to that.
Working that algorithm.
that.
YouTube
You bet.
And Evan?
It's a good take. I see where you're coming from, but for me, it's hard to definitively pick and say this era of Neil is the best or this one is my favorite, whatever. Well, I don't know. There might be a couple exceptions to that, but whatever. So I'm just gonna say great take, interesting take.
Thanks. Yeah, totally fair.
Cool. Shane, your turn.
All right. I think mine might be a little related to Tyler's, but digital music and in particular streaming has ruined people's full resonant enjoyment of Rush albums. And I say that because I grew up in an era when I had either the album on or a cassette on and pretty much had to listen start to finish in order. And then it was always 8 songs. There was a time limit as to what you could fit on the recording. And then now you've got like Vapor Trails, which I love, but that's a lot of songs to get through. You can't just, it's a longer commitment to get through the whole thing. And then on top of that, everybody shuffles now. They'll pick, play all Rush songs and they shuffle them and they come in any kind of order. And I think that you miss out some when you don't listen to the orders that they were released on the albums. And I'll even go so far as to say I listen to Hemispheres right after A Farewell to King so that I can get the 2 Cygnus stories in order. What do you think, Ryan?
Tal's first.
Sorry, I started.
Tal. What do you think, Tal?
I think I'll just go. So I think
I disgusted him.
Yeah. No, I actually think that's a phenomenal take. Shane, honestly, I think that's a phenomenal take. I think me personally at my age at 30, born in 93, I think I'm a good example of the best of both worlds. Now I never had a record player growing up. I own a record player now. I listen to my records top to bottom when I'm here physically, right? In the car,
Sure.
I only have X number of times, so I can't. So it's a little different. So I think I would 100% agree, especially pertaining to Rush. But there's sometimes I'll put it on shuffle, or there's sometimes I want to go listen to the Anarchist, so I'll just start there or whatever. But yeah, no, I think that's a phenomenal take. I think that's I 100% agree.
Thanks, Tal. I'm sorry I shocked you right
now.
I'm
ready to go. No, it's not your fault. It's okay. So I'm gonna be honest. I'm 18 years old. I don't own any records. I'm a culprit of streaming my favorite music. However, I still agree with your take because I've still listened to all of Rush's albums from top to bottom. And even though I sometimes get in the habit of just playing the one song I'm kind of into at the time, I still appreciate what they've done putting those songs into that certain order for a reason, right? Or as Ryan said, to understand the concept, right? Because sometimes there's a recurring concept or theme with the album. So I would say I've especially appreciated that with like my favorite era, like the Power Windows to Roll the Bones era, where all of those albums have some kind of underlying theme going on. So yeah, even though I'm not exactly the best person to say this because I do it, I still say it's a great take.
Maybe more good advice for listening to Rush than a great take. Igor, why do you agree with me?
Well, I'm 28, so I witnessed, all the possible formats except vinyl. So I would say let's debate, because at the end of the day, it comes down to the person's choice, how to listen to the music. And people who like Rush, they know the overall concept feel of the album that they should listen to it from the start to finish. I have no problem,
Sure.
Listening to Mystic Rhythms just that, because I don't like the Big Money, for example. I have no problem listening to the whole album. I think it kind of, it comes down to what the exact person wants to at this exact moment. So no, I don't think so that it's kind of, it influenced the big scheme of things, like how people consume music nowadays at all. But I think in terms of this band and this genre of progressive rock, I think, those who want to listen to the music as it intended, they will. So let's debate.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Tyler.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think this is a great take. I think with Rush, you have to, when you pick up an album, it doesn't matter the format, it can be digital, it can be anything. You have to listen to it from start to finish. That's how they intended it. Those are the pieces that they wanted to put on. You have to hear it from start to finish. And I do it even on Spotify. If I listen to Rush, I listen to it, pick an album and start and go all the way through. And nothing beats listening to it on vinyl too, which is where I started too. So, I wholeheartedly agree. Great take.
Everything they did was
Thanks.
intentional.
You're correct.
Including song orders. Yeah.
Jesse, what do you think?
So I'd say I'm probably 50-50, like strongly agree, and then a bit of a caveat, not like, so I think at least the first time, maybe the first couple times, like definitely. But the only issue I would have, like, if you didn't like a song and you knew you weren't gonna like it at any point, really. If I had to listen to a whole Rush album just to get to one song every time, realistically, I wouldn't listen to as much Rush. So it really depends, but yeah, I think
That's
for a
fair.
first time, like always got to hear the whole thing, give it a chance, at least give it a chance. So, but yeah, I mean, great take overall.
Thanks. How about you, Evan?
Honestly, that might be the greatest take of all time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
At least
I
to
win.
me,
You win the day.
Half of the magic of Rush is going through an album top to bottom, and the track, like the order of the track list, that was put together carefully. That wasn't just thrown together at random. I think just going through an album top to bottom is the correct way to listen to Rush. But yeah, great take.
I would like to add that, Jesse, I completely agree with you that the first few times you had kind of should listen to the whole thing, but come on, if Losing It brings me to tears, I don't want to listen to the whole Signals just to get to this 5 minutes or something to
Yeah, and then all the first track of the albums are cheating basically because you don't have to do it for those. But,
I just want to throw in here and add. So this past weekend I did an episode with his name is Daniel Bosch. His channel is called Bicycle Legs. I don't know if you've seen it, but he's going through the entire Rush discography and bringing one person on and kind of interviewing them about that specific album. He's listening to it top to bottom, and this is going to come out next month in August. So here's a little, I'm boosting it up for him, I guess, talking it up. But I chose Test for Echo mainly because I wanted the challenge of talking about Test for Echo, and probably no one else would, right? So, one thing that I noticed, not with him, but one thing I noticed about Test for Echo with a lot of folks online is they're like, "Oh, I like Driven, but I don't like anything else," or "I like Resist, but I don't like anything." It's another case of you have to listen to the record from top to bottom to appreciate the songs you love even more and gain some value and understanding and appreciate some of the other songs. So yeah, I mean, just that discussion with him, you can go watch it when it comes out in August, but I think it definitely kind of proves that point. So
in fact, on Stick It Out Season 3, that's what Paul S. did. Dog Years was one of his songs, and he decided to listen to all of Test for Echo to appreciate that one song more. And it
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Can confirm.
Good plan.
Yep. All right.
And I do have playlists that aren't every song. So I do that too.
Oh, yeah. It's the best of both worlds. I mean, that's where we're at now in music listening land. You know what I mean? So
we can do that now.
Yeah, right. Evan, go ahead.
Okay. If you break down Rush into eras, so just I guess break it down by decade, in my opinion, the best Rush is the 70s. That's all I'm gonna say. Tal, give me your thoughts.
This is totally subjective, obviously. I personally disagree. In fact, I think a hot take could have said it was that the 70s was their weakest era. I personally believe that.
Oh, man.
Because I'm a synth guy. I like how deep and rich and emotional and sometimes personal their music start to get post Signals. And I think, in their young primitive years, I just think they were so technically great and just like very, very unique stuff and very influential for prog, prog metal and everything. But I just wouldn't say that resonates with me like the mid to later stuff does. And that's just personal. So I'm not going to bash you for it, but I don't agree with your take.
Fair enough. What do you got, sports guy?
So so the take is that the 70s is the best decade?
Yeah.
Flat out.
Best run of albums, best sound, everything like that.
Okay, so best is subjective, obviously. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
But I think there's some objectivity to it as well. Again, I will defer to what I said earlier. Neil specifically said if Rush started at moving pictures, he would have been completely satisfied with it. That tells me that from 1981 onward, if that was Rush, he would have been cool with it. And from an objective standpoint, I mean, I think probably 90% of Rush fans will agree that if Rush started at moving pictures, that the 80s decade was the best. Okay. So that being said, I don't, to Tal's point about the 70s, I like it the least. It is my least favorite decade. I like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s more. 2000s plus, we group it into 4 decades here, right? So we have 3 and 3 in the 90s and the 2000s plus. But I, just because I don't like the 70s as much, I do think it is the second best decade, if that makes any sense, right? So there's an objective and a subjective, left brain, right brain. No. But yeah, so no, I think the 80s is the best. The 70s is second best.
Okay. That seems to be the opinion that, or like the popular opinion. Everyone loves the 80s. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's great.
Well, the popular opinion is the objective opinion, right? In theory.
Right.
So
yeah.
I mean,
okay. Igor, what do you think?
Yeah, that's totally subjective. Yeah, I also like 80s the most. And I don't like Fly By Night and Caress of Steel at all. I just don't get them, like, seriously. And I think Rush, the first album, is the best out of the first like 4. And I think 2012 is overrated as hell.
Oh, you're gonna make me
Mic
cry,
drop.
dude.
I would agree with that. It's a great take. 21. It's still great. It's still a great album. I do think it's overrated for sure. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, I'm sorry. Who's next? Tyler?
Yeah. I would. Yeah, the sweet spot's 76 to 85. But
100%. Yeah.
I came in in 81, right after Moving Pictures. I came in at Signals was the album that came out at the time, but the first album I heard was 2112. So it's like, for me, those 70s albums, there's a lot of expansion from 2112 on. There's a lot of expansion in the sound, and I think in the 80s that's when they really blew up. But that's a tough one. I'm gonna say that's a great take, but oh boy, that's rough, because the 80s stuff is so sweet. I mean, but yeah, they would not have wrote Cygnus X1 book 1 or 2 in 1984. It just would not have happened. But yeah, I'm gonna go with great take.
All right, cool, man. Thank you.
But it hurts me.
Jesse, what do you think, man?
So I might actually, I was gonna say I couldn't agree, but you kind of got me with this. I thought for a second, if I took like my top 25 Rush songs and then divided them up to see which is before 1980 and which is after, it'd be really close, and it might actually even go over the line back into the 70s. So even if I can't totally say I agree, I think you do raise a really good point. Like, a lot of people kind of underestimate just how much good stuff there was in the 70s to choose from. All the epics, obviously, and yeah, it really comes close for me. So it's definitely a good point, if anything.
All right, and last but not least, Shane, what do you think?
I agreed with Igor's take a lot. The first album is one of my top few. I like it probably way more than I should, for the reasons I mentioned about Alex's style earlier, but Moving Pictures just really gives the 80s all the heft in that. So I have to go with 80s as the best.
All right. And back to me, obviously, I think it's a great take. Hemispheres is their best album. That's all I'm going to say.
Can't hate on that.
All right. So viewers, if you've watched this far, let us know what you think, of our 7 hot takes. If you have a hot take that is, something you think is super contrarian or super controversial or super hot take, leave it in the comments. Let's all debate it civilly, of course. Yes, thanks Tyler and Shane, for doing your first episode. The rest of you guys, Tal, Agor, Jesse, and Evan, thanks for hopping on. This was a lot of fun. Let us know in the comments if you like this type of great take, let's debate style hot takes episode, and if so, maybe we'll do it again in the future with a brand new panel. Next week, I believe next week we're diving back into counterparts with Nobody's Hero. So we'll see you then. Take care, everybody.